American liar president asks Saudi Arabia's help, openly fights it in secret. How can you claim our friendship? Yeah, he's not claiming your friendship, dum-dum. He's saying that you guys, the Saudis and the Russians sell to Europe. If they keep their prices high because they desperately need the money, then the price of oil will be higher, and therefore American producers, those patriotic companies like Exxon and Chevron and the folks at BP who we allow to drill in our Gulf and off our shores, and in some cases on our land, they'll sell it at a higher price to Europe because they can, because there's a lack of supply. So let's, and that's there we go. This is all these things, right? The whole thing is based on this. So let's take a look, shall we? Can I introduce you guys to the global supply chain? And also, can I remind you, and especially Trumpsters, maggots, Republicans in name only, gather round, shall we? Because while you're busy shitting on America for having some sort of unique problem caused by our electoral choices, meaning that the American people chose Joe Biden by an overwhelming number, beat Donald Trump, and therefore somehow America deserves to be flushed down a toilet, or is indeed being attacked from within by its own president because of alleged supply chain issues and gas prices and stuff, and that this is our president, the president of the United States of America, attacking our own citizenry in an attempt to destroy the country. I would like to point you to the fact that there is also a world. There are other countries, big ones you like Russia and China, ones you wish you could live in, ones that, you believe have strong leaders. You can't argue with how strong they are as leaders. They're very strong. They're so strong that Russia invites the NRA to have events in their country when you do not have the right to own a weapon in Russia. And if you have to have a rifle license for like 5 years before you can get a handgun license, and then they count your ammo. And if you go hunting with 10 bullets and come back with 9 shells, you get a visit from the cops. Good times. But at least he's a strong leader. You can't argue that Vladimir Putin's is a strong leader. And of course, let's not even talk about gun rights in China. There are none. But on top of that, you guys are apparently big fans of how incredible the Chinese economy, and they're going to eat our lunch. Remember, even Biden's been caught using this phrase. They're going to eat our lunch. That's what it is. So you're always behind China, and it's because of our stupid leaders. It's not the fact that consumers, especially people who shop at Walmart specifically, are responsible for $250 billion of our $500 billion trade deficit all by themselves. That's right. Walmart shoppers. You could cut our trade deficit in half simply by, when you're at Walmart, looking at 95% of the things that are sold in the store that aren't food, I suppose, and even those I have questions about, looking at the label, and if it says, Fabrique au Chine or made in China on it, maybe picking something else or going fucking home and buying something on Etsy, you cowboy. Right? So this is from an article in the New York Times, which you can see why it stood out to me. How the supply chain broke and why it won't be fixed anytime soon. That's the headline. That seems like clickbait. Read the second line. Confession. We didn't even have a logistics beat before the pandemic. Now we do. Here's what we've learned about the global supply chain disruption. We have been, like China entered the World Trade Organization, got, developing nations status in the 90s. They have, over the last 2 decades, everybody's been talking about how China's going to it'd be the most powerful economy on earth. It's inevitable. By 2040, they've got a plan. It's coming. There's no way to avoid it. And everybody just shrugged that off and went, well, I guess that's true. Must be true. Everybody's saying it, right? How many times have you heard that? You didn't hear it from me, and I've been there. And I mean, it just became its own self perpetuating myth. And And there's a lot of reasons we could go into why China will not become the dominant economy in the world. But effectively, it has become the factory for a lot of consumer goods in the United States. Cheap, in a lot of cases, shitty consumer goods. The real stuff, when Foxconn assembles phones in China, they're making the chips in America or in South Korea, and they're making the glass comes from Japan, and then they're assembled in China. And those assembly plants are now being moved to the United States or North America, because even though it's really cheap in this decade, it gets really expensive in this decade. And if you'd just kept the fucking factory here, it would have been more expensive overall if you balanced it out, but there wouldn't be a shock to your system that costs you more money ultimately anyways. It's actually cheaper to have steady, normal production, even at a higher wage over time, than having this, well, we jumped ahead for 10 years and now we're falling way behind. So there you go. Computer chips, exercise equipment, breakfast cereal. By now, you probably heard the world is running short of many great products, or of a great many products. In an era in which we become accustomed to clicking and waiting for whatever we desire to arrive at our doors, we've experienced the shock of not being able to buy toilet paper, which is totally not related to supply chain. That has to do with, panic buying, and having to wait months for curtains, which I don't know where, there's no link there. So I don't know the big curtain embargo, and needing to compromise on the color of our new cars. Eek. Why is this happening? Global supply chain. When did it start? I mean, the disruptions go back to early last year. No, they don't. They absolutely do not. They go back to the beginning of the idea that the global supply chain is a cheaper option. It isn't. It can be in the short term, because you're like, oh shit, we can buy this thing cheaper here and this thing cheaper here, and assembling it's cheaper here. We can buy this thing cheaper here, and they have a better thing to buy this cheaper here. But then getting them all together, it relies on the trucks, trains, and boats, which are not always reliable, that involve weather and flooding and all kinds of other shit. And if one thing goes down, the whole supply chain falls apart. And so it's a risk you take. There's been an ROI on this, a return on investment. Is the risk worth it? And ultimately, it's proving not to be. For years, it seemed like it was. And it artificially depressed the cost of goods in the United States, so people could buy a lot of stuff very cheap. So one of America's biggest growing industries is storage. You don't have room in your house for all the shit you buy, so people are getting storage. I mean, it is one of the fastest growing real estate sectors in the country, outpacing houses in a lot of places, largely because you don't have to put bathrooms in them and all kinds of other stuff like that. But still, there you go. This is what are you guys yammering about? Hold on one second. Steel started going up just before Trump left. The tariffs did not help. No, it did not. It's Coitens. I beg your pardon. But the belief is, if you look at this article, this is a picture, I'm guessing, from the Port of Los Angeles last week. Cost of moving cargo has shot up. Shot up, by the way, is that one of these containers, getting one of these containers across costs early this year, about $3,000. Now it costs about $20,000 per container. Because there are fewer ships, because there are fewer people. There are fewer truckers to pick these things up and take them across the country and bring them back, because people don't want to drive for low pay for long distances, and because they've had a drop off in workers in Asia, specifically in China, as far as shipping goes. So this is the supply chain breaking down. This is the reality of it. Okay, so, but if you look at this article, this is the Port of Savannah. There's a bunch of these things stirring up. Looks like something out of iRobot. Why couldn't factories just produce more? Many did, but this produced its own troubles because there's a backlog. The supply chain is the supplying part. Not the demand, not the manufacturing, but supplying it is a big aspect of this. Getting it there. Factories generally need to bring in components to make other things they export, right? So you can't get the pieces. A lot of the stuff that's quote unquote made in China is actually assembled in China. Kind of stretching the meaning of the word made, if you know what I mean. For example, a computer assembled in China, there we go, may require a chip made in Taiwan or Malaysia, a flat panel display from South Korea, and dozens of other electronic panels from around the world requiring specialized chemicals from other parts of China or Europe. Right. So what happened? All the giant container ships, they got stuck in the wrong places, yada, yada. What exactly is in short supply? Little bits of everything, because that's the problem with the global supply chain. It's not one big crash point or you could fix that. It's the little bits of everything that slow everything down, especially when something like COVID happens. It's a choke point. So let's look at, now this article talks about, I mean, as if this is, if you read this, you would think this has to do with just American consumerism, and this is the only place it's happening. Right? You would think that this is the issue, right? That this is the United States issue, and it's really just us. This is an American issue caused by our government and our circumstance. Instead, it is a worldwide problem because it is directly related to COVID and all the ancillary problems to do with COVID. Lots of dead workers, lots of lockdowns or limited workspace stuff where you have to distance each other, so people can't have as many people working in a factory as possible because it will spread and it will wipe everybody out. And it's funny how these developing countries, and I don't include China in that, any country with a space program is not developing. That would be my rule. You can have whatever rule you want. That would be my rule. If you have a space program, you are not a developing country. You are developed. That's the very definition of developed. Okay. So if they have, the idea is that we rely on Chinese goods. They're not coming here. It's all backed up at the port of Los Angeles, and that's the problem. Well, I got news for you. This is happening everywhere. Fears of a bottleneck recession, how shortages are hurting Germany. Europe's largest economy is particularly vulnerable to shortages of key parts and raw materials because of its dependence on exports. They make stuff there. They get stuff that they need to make the stuff that they send out. A machine for winding paper into rolls at Voith, a German company that has started buying from suppliers closer to its factories. Get used to that idea too. This will also lead to pay raises around the globe and companies having to retool to deal with this particular fact. And until they can find a way to, fix supply chain issues or find cheaper sources of stuff closer to home, this is just going to have to be an aspect where they bite the bullet. And the idea is that there'll be less profit left over, and therefore they're going to have to find other ways to make up for it. Yeah. Anyways, in Germany, where 1 in 4 jobs depends on exports, the crisis is gumming up the world's supply chain. See, I thought it was the United States. I thought this was all Brandon's fault. Apparently, yes, we were short in UK too, empty shelves. That has a lot to do with trucking too, Martha. You have a lot of stuff there, but getting it around in time is a major factor. Also, Brexit. Brexit, although you could argue the values of it as a policy, pro and con, the timing was fucking terrible. It's amazing. It's almost like the people behind Brexit couldn't imagine that there would be a problem with global supply chains that would be acute and affect the entire globe. Yeah. So weighing heavily on the economy, which is Europe's largest and linchpin to global commerce, have begun to predict a bottleneck recession. That's a supply chain issue. There you go. Mar-a-Lago is up for sale. Is it? Where's that from? Yeah, Brexit's a pile of pants. So here, this is Germany. This is, the biggest economy in Europe and the most powerful exporter. Cars, all kinds of stuff. The Germans make a lot of stuff. And they're being hit hard because they need little things to make their big things. And when those little things don't come in, the big things can't go out. And when they do have the big things that can go out, if there's nothing to take them out, meaning trucks and trains and ships and containers and shit like that, they just kind of sit there, which is bad for things with electronic parts. They not only get, they become obsolete over time. So the second they leave your factory, it's a countdown to obsolescence. Not only do they have that issue, but they have issues with just weather, leaving stuff to rot. Look at the Chinese factories that have piles of shit. We'll look at that in a second. Supply shortages sap strength of Eurozone recovery. See, I thought that this whole inflation thing was a U.S. thing, and that Biden's policies were causing all these problems all over the world. Gee whiz. But apparently not. The Eurozone's having the same issue. Eurozone, and this is from September. Eurozone business activity remained strong last month despite fears about the Delta variant of the coronavirus. I have some good news at the end of this, by the way. Stick around. I do have some good news. Despite fears of the Delta variant of the coronavirus, widespread supply chains, according to a survey which suggested the bloc's economy could be back to pre-COVID levels by year end. So this is not, they don't expect it to go on like this. And then, of course, any reliance we have on them or they have on us will again start to pick up. And then this is the biggest fear Republicans have going into 2022, is that they're going to shit on everything about this until the end of the year. And then when it starts to come back around again, they're going to have to fight this on like CRT and abortion. And that's all they're going to have next year. And they know this. Okay, so Wall Street Journal. Supply chain crisis fuels latest retreat from globalization. Now, this is the overall business model shift that's going on worldwide. And again, you're going to see a shift. Like I said, go to IKEA now, and a lot of the stuff that you'll see that used to say Fabrique au Chine, thanks to our Canadian brothers and sisters in the North who want everything in English and French, or made in China, is now saying made in the Czech Republic. They have moved factories there or upped the amount of work that's being done there and lessened their factories in other places. And I'm not going to subscribe to this, but the Wall Street Journal is making this point. And we'll go to here. Check this out. Russia hikes rates as economists warn of triple threat to economy. So again, I thought, Russia's a very powerful leader. I know a lot of Trumpers and maggots appreciate everything that Putin did for Trump. We don't know why he stopped. Apparently he's taken his foot off the brake, and now the stories about the pee-pee tape are starting to come to surface again. But they shit the bed on their vaccine rollout, and their anti-vax attempts to get ahead of everybody, like allegedly stealing the AstraZeneca formula to make the Sputnik vaccine and then rushing it through testing, when AstraZeneca is the one that had the most problems so far, even beyond the Johnson & Johnson pause. It seems to be Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, AstraZeneca as far as trustworthiness overall for a lot of folks. But they ended up stealing the AstraZeneca formula, allegedly. And so a lot of Russians, only 35% of Russians are vaccinated because they don't trust it. So they had to shut down schools for 2 weeks. Putin's in hiding because people in his circle have it. He's been vaccinated, but they're not taking any chances because they've had the Sputnik and they think it's shit. That their interest rates are at 7.5%. Russian economy recovered to its pre-coronavirus size earlier this year. Gee whiz, they're almost the size of Italy again. A quicker recovery than first expected and faster than most large economies because it was based on bullshit, but now faces serious headwinds from both home and abroad. The central bank said inflation, wait a minute, I thought inflation was an American issue caused by the Biden administration in an attempt to destroy America. Was developing substantially above forecast and is expected to be within the range of 7.4 to 7.9% at the end of 2021. 7.9% inflation in Russia. The average Russian makes about $9,000 US. The average American, somewhere in the order of 68,000 US. Just so you know. So when you talk about 5% raise in what money you have left over to, to pay for expensive gas or expensive toys or expensive gifts or expensive food this holiday season, a 5.3 to 5.6% rise after, by the way, a year of nearly fucking nothing, 1.2% because we were all locked down. Look at this shit. 7.4 to 7.9 by the end of the year. They said they were recovering. Governor Elvira Nabiulina has taken an aggressive approach to taming inflation, has warned for months that rising price threatens to derail the Russian recovery. The train has left the station. 68,000 medium income. No, that is the current one, Joy. That's median. Might be median household, but you know what I mean. Those fears prompted, and we're talking household in Russia as well, 9,000. You got 4 people, they're living on 9,000. You got 2 people, they're living on 9,000. You got 18 people, they're living on 9,000 in Russia. Those fears prompted her to increase the central bank's key interest rate by 0.75% to 7.5%, a more aggressive hike than financial markets were expecting. The Russian ruble advanced on the news, gaining 1.4. They're trying to strengthen the ruble against the U.S. dollar, trading 70.1. Its strongest level since before the outbreak, blah, blah, blah. Okay. They're also, they just had to do a new 2-week school lockdown. They've had worse, by the way. This is followed, this is their interest rate. When they spike the interest rate, that's what they believe drives down this business right here. So you can kind of track it you get that interest rate above it and it starts driving the interest rate down. That's what they're hoping for. Unfortunately, look at this little guy right here. The problem is when they crisscross right here. This business, that's what's happening right here. Look at this shit. The problem is this isn't based on loaning, or this is based on the availability of goods. This is based on supply chain problems and whatever they're producing. So like even within the country, if factories aren't producing shit, they're screwed. Does this interest any of you guys, or do you just want to like go watch stuff about Gabby? They found Laundrie's body. Here you go. Global supply chain disruption forces U.S. consumers to go without. Again, a very U.S.-centric version of events from VOA. China's the center of manufacturing of the world. Not for long. And when COVID-19 and when COVID-19 hit, manufacturing was disrupted, producing delays, giving way to shipping delays. Now it's difficult, sometimes impossible to get certain items. VOA's Carolyn Presutti looks at what's missing. And by the way, there's not a lack of waffles. I don't know what the fuck that is. Now let's look at the Financial Times. The great uncoupling. One supply chain for China, one for everyone everywhere else. This is where we're headed in the next 2 decades. If you'd asked anybody about this, except me and a couple other people who were there, if you'd asked anybody about this 5 years ago, they would have said this is impossible. That this is that China being the linchpin to worldwide production is indeed the key to them becoming the most dominant economy in the world, and there's no escaping it. They got a death grip on production. No one's gonna ever pull it back. It's done. It's cooked, right? Think back 5 years ago. Was anybody talking about it in these terms? And how did this come about? Did this come about because of Trump's tariffs? Did this come about because a change in U.S. consumer issues? Did we stop? Were there a little bit of a downturn because of China's treatment of the Uyghur Muslims, for example? I would argue a little bit of that is a factor. Certainly, media companies stopped telling the story about China as strongly, like the NBA's behind that. LeBron and all those guys protecting China. And John Cena's weird apology for calling Taiwan a country, which it is was it was becoming increasingly obvious that there was a skeevy aspect to this. But now it's not about the morals of how they treat the Uyghurs and the like, or whether or not they're starting a war with India over the water in Tibet, because nobody gives like the Chinese and to some degree even the Indians don't give a rat fuck about the people of Tibet or their sovereignty or any of that stuff. It's the glacier water that they need. Although now with the flooding in China, that's a debatable point as well. It might have like, can we send some of that water to Tibet? Maybe we can make it into a glacier. What happens? So, John Cena speaking Mandarin was unsettling. Well, it wasn't that he was speaking Mandarin; it was what he said. So, anyways, the right now, China and Russia. I mean, they were both looking pretty impervious a few years ago, and the problems that they're finding right now are completely self-constructed. And we'll, you guys, we've talked about, my experience in China, and I'm a big fan of Chinese culture and the Chinese people. It's the government that's just gotten increasingly terrible, and it's very sad. And when we were over there shooting the travel show that I was doing, it started off very kind of naive fun about just a travel show to show the sights, and then increasingly it became it became obvious that this was another just kind of propaganda manipulation by the government through funding. So, anyways, earlier this year, 4 dozen lawyers, accountants, and bankers from all over Latin America piled into a conference room in an office tower on Miami waterfront. They listened spellbound as Nicholas Chen, an energetic lawyer who had come all the way from Taiwan, told them about an exodus of manufacturing from China that could make them rich. The tsunami waters are flowing outward now, Mr. Chen said to the assembled audience. Pointing to the U.S. trade war with China, he said many companies were having second thoughts about maintaining operations in the Asian country. Huge numbers of China-located companies are shifting their purchase orders, manufacturing capacities, and operations out of China. This can become our El Dorado. And Taiwan's, along with Vietnam, Cambodia, South Korea, and other countries are there to pick up the slack, believe me. Knows how to make a good pitch. Starting in the 1990s, the influx made Suzhou one of the largest clusters of Taiwanese manufacturing in China, blah, blah, blah. They're moving out too. Driven by President Trump's push to decouple the U.S. economy from China and the disruption caused by the coronavirus pandemic. Yeah, that's the part that came in. He wasn't decoupling us during his deals. He was trying to even out the coupling and keep it going. For pittance, by the way. Remember, his trade deal was going to be $30 billion a year. $30 billion. We have a $29 trillion economy. We have a $500 billion trade deficit with China, and they were going to buy $30 billion worth of farm goods a year. Like, we can't sell that shit to Europe. Are you out of your mind? Untangling supply chains that have built up over a generation, complex and difficult task, and the multinational companies which sell it to the Chinese market will stay and even expand. But if companies that once used the mainland to make goods for export do decide to depart in significant numbers, it will represent a major reversal of 5 decades of economic integration between the U.S. and China. That, I would argue, is now happening. And this is, when was this article? Yeah, October 5th, 2020. They're talking about this. And this was also pointing to a direction that that the Biden administration was talking about as well. Here's more supply chain stuff. By the way, this whole thing, the point of this is, the great uncoupling, is that basically COVID was a force accelerator for this situation. It gave everybody an excuse. The Uyghur concentration camps combined with this are all the excuse major corporations needed to move someplace else. And there are other countries with it's been my argument about how we could have gotten out of Afghanistan. There's nothing that would have stopped Trump from last year from going, we got to get our people out. COVID's too terrible. You guys can stand on your own. We're leaving. Could have done it last year without a shot fired. Nothing. Pack it up. Yeah, COVID. We're bringing everybody home. It's COVID. We can't stick around. We can't train you guys anyways, which is the only thing we were doing. So we're getting out. But he didn't, because he was never going to leave, which he's already said. All right. So coal and iron pile up in South Africa on rail constraints. So again, this has nothing to do with production. This has nothing to do with demand On the other side, it has everything to do with transportation. And this is incontinent. They're not incontinent. In the continent of Africa, within the continent. Fentanyl comes from China and Mexico. Largely comes from China through Mexico, but there's, because the cartels apparently are concerned that fentanyl is killing their addicts. So that's another conversation for another time. Like when the cartels are trying to no, stop buying fentanyl, buy more meth. It keeps you awake and you buy more of it. Like fentanyl's bad for their business model. South Africa's having a lot of problems in terms of their transportation. And there's a lot of internal security issues and safety issues, and South Africa's kind of screwed right now. But also on top of that is they have goods and services even beyond COVID that can't get out of the country or can't get out of that section of the country to the other parts of the country, which stops stuff from being made in those parts of the country, which make their way into Europe or into other stuff. Okay, so let me see it. This is supply chain inflation headwinds hamper the global recovery. This is, pretty recent. Rudy COVID chart. 30 billion is a spit in the wind, the economic ocean. You don't spit in the wind, Jim Croce. That's right. Yeah, I mean, everything Trump sells as his reason why it was amazing was bullshit, and even the illusion of it was wiped out by his shitty handling of COVID, where he was like, I like to downplay it. I don't want to fuck the market. So this is third quarter 2021. More than 18 months after the global recession triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic started, the economic recovery continues. I thought we were out of it, and we built it again. Didn't Trump build it twice because of the Great Foundation? Mm-hmm. This trend owes much to progress in the vaccine rollout over the summer. Oh wait, who did the vaccine rollout over the summer? Who found out there was no plan and then put together a plan? I'm racking my brain. Particularly in advanced economies, in turn, this is spurring a rebound in consumption of high contact services. Situation remains heterogeneous. Heterogeneous? I'm going to go with that. In emerging economies, heterogeneous just sounds very weird. And I like erogenous, sounds very sexy. This rebound is benefiting export-oriented countries while service-dependent economies continue lagging. By the way, there is an entire conversation to be having about how China is talking about how they are moving from a manufacturing economy to a service economy. Basically just servicing the new millionaires they made, they created during the manufacturing trend that they've had over the last few years, because those fucking people have nowhere to spend their money except outside the country. So they're trying to keep them busy so they keep their money inside the country, and because they keep trying to smuggle it out and buy property in Vancouver. Despite the positive outlooks, signs the global recovery is losing momentum are accumulating. Oh, the global recovery is losing momentum. See, I thought that was the United States. I thought that was all because Joe Biden has dementia and he doesn't know anything. Pandemic outbreaks and critical links of the supply chain. Wait, we're not a critical link of the supply chain. We're at the end of the supply chain. Have resulted in supply disruptions, feeding price pressures. These disruptions are starting to affect manufacturers' production and sales across the globe. Headwinds represented by supply concerns, labor shortages, and inflation, alongside the lingering threat of COVID-19, add to the list of risks and uncertainties. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to being tied to the entire planet. In light of the continued recovery, Coface upgraded its risk assessment for 26 countries, including Germany, France, Italy, Spain, Switzerland, and Belgium. Strong exports of manufactured goods to advanced markets are prompting upgrades for export-oriented economies in Central and Eastern Europe, Poland, Hungary, Czechia. In Asia, South Korea, Singapore, and Hong Kong. Curious that they talk about Hong Kong, but not in terms of China. And in Turkey, which is that's a whole other thing that's happening. After downgrading 78 countries' risk assessments last year, these upgrades are in addition to the 16 already implemented in the first half of 2020. They are accompanied by 30 selectoral assessment upgrades. So they're like this. There's hamstrings every fucking where in the entire world. Global manufacturing sector has recovered fast since mid-2020, prompted by increased spending on consumer goods. People are buying the shit that was sitting. Now it's making the new shit that keep that going, which is ridiculous and nearly impossible, but they'll pretend it is. Because of robust household demand, strong trade flows continue to be a key part of the economic growth. That's right, because the United States has continued to grow and since January, weirdly enough. Notably in Asia Pacific, demand for electronics and commodities are indeed benefiting several markets in the region, such as South Korea and, oh, look at that little country. Markets at Taiwan. The economy of several key commodity exporters, Russia, Ukraine, South Africa, Chile, Algeria, etc., are also supported by higher prices, except internally, where we noted earlier that they're fucked. So let's see. I wanted to get. Let's see. this little part right here kind of stands out. The Chinese economy is experiencing some turbulence. Also of importance to the global economy, China's economy shows signs of slowdown ahead of the second half of 2021. In the third quarter, GDP was up 4.9% from a year ago. You have to understand, 4.9% sounds like, oh shit, your GDP's up. That's a number we like, right? 4.9% growth is fantastic if you have 340 million people. If you have allegedly 1.3 billion people, 4.9% is a slide backwards. You need 9% growth just to feed the babies. The slowest pace since the third quarter of 2020, meaning it's going backwards. On a quarterly basis, activity merely expended plus 2.2%. We forecast China's economy to grow 7.5% this year, expecting GDP growth to remain low in the last quarter. That's wishful thinking, and that's if they bail out Evergrande, and that's all the shit they're talking about. Several factors are behind the deceleration, that's a lovely word, in Chinese economic activity. Policy tightening and credit growth, that's Xi Jinping's, in case you don't know, he set a rule on how hard it is and what qualifications you need to get loans as a developer to build more properties, because there was too much expansion, like out of control expansion in the real estate market in China, and they were trying to quell that. But unfortunately, the method they used to quell it, all it did was stop the companies that were experiencing a downturn because of COVID and all kinds of other factors from being able to borrow the money they need to pay their debts while they transition through and do other shit. So they basically they just threw a giant monkey wrench in their economic system. It was already stupid to begin with, but they basically just tripped their worst runner, who was pretending to be in front the whole time. Like in a relay race or like 400 meter or whatever, where you could lap somebody and you're like, that guy's ahead of the other guy. And he's like, no, actually, he's behind everyone else. He's just 2 feet. He's so far behind. The other guy is catching up. The guy in front is catching up to him. And if you look at it without looking at the track or where he was, it looks like this guy's winning. When this guy is way winning, that's the Chinese real estate market right now. They're the last guy in the relay race who's so far behind that he looks like he's ahead. That's what they've been doing. Softening domestic consumption, that's a lovely way of putting it, and energy rationing for industries. This is also, by the way, a big part of what you're seeing in trade of goods coming out of China. They are rationing coal right now because they're running out of energy. They import. Do people even know that China imports huge amounts of coal and oil and gas to run their economy? The illusion has always been that they have giant coal mines, they're always running, and that they're just powering it because they have a lot of coal, so that's why they burn so much coal. They buy a shit ton of it from Australia because it burns more efficiently, the coal that they get from Australia, than the shit they have in their country. There is a difference. There's no such thing as clean coal, but there sure as shit is coal that's more efficient for what you want, provides more energy. Anyways, so I'm not a plunker. Yeah. Let's take a look at this guy. This is Israel. I'm just kind of picking other countries, kind of like Germany. Jobs galore, but Israelis don't want them. Post-COVID, it seems like a lot of people don't want to go back to the daily grind, and right now they don't have to. This looks like an article from the fucking New York Times about the job force in America, right? Didn't you think this was only happening here? This is happening all across Europe too. How many of their cities have pollution? You mean in China? It's Terrible. Yeah. Right? How many? I know this guy's teaching a yoga class and nobody's showing up. These are some bathing costumes, by the way. This is some serious lack of fun. That you're like, how do you not? All right. Just saying. And look, take this job and shove it. I ain't working here no more. A woman done left, took all the reason I was working for. Like, really? Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, is quoting Johnny Paycheck's song from the 70s. And they're playing. Look at this. You can even play a link of it. And by the way, this guy, like this Johnny Paycheck, by the way, he was a sex symbol in the 70s. Now he looks like somebody that they found guilty and after years discovered he was the criminal behind a series of murders in the 70s. He looks like a true crime victim or a true crime villain. It's early to say exactly how the pandemic has changed the nature of the labor market in the long run, but in Israel and most of the developed world, wait a minute, most of the developed world? I thought this was, again, isn't this a U.S. problem? It seems to have at least created a serious supply-demand imbalance. You think? Economies are bouncing back from the worst COVID recession and lots of jobs are on offer, but workers are less anxious to apply for them. Let's see. Control. There we go. Open link, a new tab. We'll take a look at that guy in a second. That's a Guardian article. How the supply chain crisis is affecting 6 big economies. 6. From container ship queues in the U.S. to power cuts in China, the post-COVID pickup in activity is taking a toll. Wait, we're not going to have all the plastic crap we can bury ourselves in? U.S. retailers telling people to shop early for for Christmas because the likely shortage is caused by supply chain crisis. You think? And then you know what's going to happen? There's going to be a glut of shit because they ordered it all and it's going to come late, and then there's going to be some like Christmas in February sale. United States, yes, we were talking about this. China. What, China? What are you talking about? The lights are beginning to go out on large parts of China's economy and the cities. The investment banks, Nomura and Goldman Sachs, have downgraded their forecast for growth in the world's number 2 economy in the wake of, and we do mean number 2, economy in the wake of power cuts that have idled factories and are also extending already long delays at ports. Electricity cuts to the entire sections of Xinjiang in northern Liaoning province have meant traffic lights haven't worked for a week, raising safety concerns for the city's many cyclists. It's quite inconvenient to ride in the dark. One resident, Zhu Meiying, told the South China Morning Post, for people who drive, they have car lights, but for people who ride bicycles, it's quite dangerous. Street lights on some roads have to be kept on because it's about lives, right? Zhu questioned what the government's plans were to address the problem. That's adorable. Liaoning province says rationing is the only thing stopping the power grid from collapsing. Some compounds are without power during daylight hours, cutting off water supply and elevators, even in high rises. Germany, we talked about this one as well, 14.3% surge in energy prices in Germany, hence the need for that pipeline for Russia, which they're using for. And again, let's say you have a problem with Russia in the future. And one of the ways you want to hurt them is by cutting off their the petrodollars that they have going into Europe. Do you want to sink a bunch of ships, or do you want to cut off a pipeline and harm no one? Just saying strategically, if anybody wants to think about things. This is put down to growing demand, short supply, lack of alternative energy sources, blah, blah, blah. Here we go. Russia. Look at that. Wait a minute. Russia? I thought they had a strong leader. Christmas is canceled, right? As energy prices, yeah, I'm sorry, maggots and Trumpsters who say Christmas is canceled. I guess you're just going to have to use it as a religious holiday where you appreciate Jesus. I'm sorry that you have grown more than anyone else to believe that Christmas is only a commodity holiday devoid of any moral worth. Oops. Russia, as energy prices soar elsewhere, Russia finds itself in an enviable position of being the world's largest net oil and gas exporter combined. Except, while Russian state television has gloated over videos of British drivers queuing for petrol, the Kremlin has told Europeans that the sooner its Nord Stream 2 pipeline is open, the quicker gas prices will stabilize. By the way, they're choking this off on purpose. By the way, one of the reasons why we have higher oil prices because U.S. providers are selling to Europe at a higher rate because Russia's cutting them off and driving the price up. Same thing with the Saudis who want the price to go up because they're running out of oil and they need to make as much money off of it in the final days as they possibly can. It's hard. It's a hard shock to a Russian economy that has done so much to shock itself, unilaterally banning Western imports of meat, fruit, vegetables, and dairy in 2014. Who was president then? Yet there are shortages. High-end Moscow restaurants say they cannot find high-quality marbled beef. Boo fuckity who. The good stuff is being exported to higher prices to China. Or octopus from Indonesia. This was another article too, like Indonesian octopus. This is the shit that Moscow is bitching about. Could you have more of like a dick oligarchy? Think about what you hear written about the United States economy, right? What do you hear about that Americans want to be able to buy toys for their kids this Christmas, right? That's the biggest consumer concern. Gas prices, I got to drive to work. I'm concerned about gas prices. Meanwhile, Russia is worried about marbled beef for their rich restaurants. Again, average Russian household, $9,000 US. And octopus from Indonesia. Food inflation is a 7% annual rate. It's highest in 5 years. An issue the Kremlin did its utmost to keep under wraps before parliamentary elections last month. Yeah, so fake news. The UK, what a surprise. Threatened by a pingdemic that forced thousands of workers to self-isolate after they came into contact with someone with COVID-19. This is just leftover from this. This has nothing to do with economic policy. Australia, same kind of situation here. Shortages of timber, steel, and other materials are causing havoc in Australia's huge construction industry, and builders are struggling to keep up with demand. With housing prices rising at their fastest rate since 1989, owing to post-pandemic demand and government stimulus, companies are scrambling to get hold of supplies, and prices are said to be going through the roof. Adam Robson, who runs Precaro, a design and construction business in Gold Coast, Queensland, said delivery times for steel and timber have blown it out from 4 weeks to 4 or 5 months amid the supply squeeze. You used to be able to buy timber off the shelf, but you can't do that anymore. A lot of it comes from China and India, and we just can't get enough containers to the ports. See, I thought, can't just get enough containers to the ports. Fuck, they're right there. Housewives, do you ever realize the rich are usually whining about stupid shit constantly? Well, I have not. I've not heard a consistent bitching in articles in the New York Times about people in New York going, I just can't. Have you tried to get a great marbled beef steak right now? It's terrible. Like, those are not. Even Americans have the sense, even if they feel that way, to shut the fuck up most of the time. But I guess in the Moscow Times, that's the thing. Like, we can't even get. I'm having to eat some of my. I'm having to turn to human trafficking to get good cuts of meat. Australia is expected to increase output to its economy by 4% this year, despite its two most populous states, New South Wales and Victoria, being in lengthy lockdowns, which they've just eased. The Reserve Bank of Australia said this week that it has expected shipping costs and higher wages to push inflation above its target. Yeah, wages go up, and so does inflation. Just saying. That's for all the UBI folks out there. The minute UBI goes online, cost of consumer goods goes up, whatever that amount is. Everybody's going to want to scramble for that extra dollar that's in the system. It becomes a zero sum. Add $1,000, lose $1,000 in a consumer-based economy. I got news for you. As long as someone has to be paid to climb a fucking tree and get coconuts out of it, or to harvest pineapples, or to fucking sort apples, and that person doesn't want to do that work for free, I can't imagine why. Those apples are going to cost something. As long as they require water, which is a finite resource, soil fertilizer, tilling, pesticides or some pest reduction thing, does that fruit you eat is going to cost something. If it doesn't cost cash, it's going to cost effort. So even if you remove money from the process, if somebody's like, hey, I picked this apple, give it to me. No, fucking shine my shoes. I almost broke my fucking neck getting this basket of apples. You want an apple? What are you doing for me? Why should I have to do anything for you? You got a whole bushel. You can't eat all those. Yeah, that's not the point. I risked my neck climbing that fucking tree. Yeah, but now you're down here. What do you mean now I'm down here? Piss off. Everything's socialism once the work is done and you're just staring at the bushel, right? That's the issue. So until we have robots making shit and the robots are making the robots, I got news for you. You're going to end up paying somebody for something. And if those people are automatically getting $1,000 a month extra, their rent's going to go up. The cost of their shit that they buy is going to go up. And then that's going to spread to everything, because it's not like you give somebody $1,000 for UBI. And this is why it doesn't work. I mean, I like the emotional idea of it, but this is why it will never work. Unless you have rent control and price controls and control and controls of controls before you even try it, it's fucking gone. And here's the thing. You get $1,000 a month. Your landlord knows this. Your car company knows this. So suddenly, between the two of them, which one's going to take the biggest fucking chunk? And now the dude with the bushel of apples is going to well, they were $1. Now they're $1.25. You got an extra $1,000. You do too. Yeah, but I got a car and my rent just went up. Oh shit. All right. Well, here's $1.25. And then those little quarters go everywhere in the entire economy to where that $1,000 you get from the government and UBI turns into $1,500 of inflation. Yeah, the Great Reset has been canceled due to a lack of reset. Exactly.